I would like to welcome you all, dear distinguished guests, students, professors. It is a great honor for me to host this event at the very last day of the week. And I'm very happy to be here with you. And before giving a start to our lecture, night lecture, I would like to thank you for being here and for sharing this valuable time with me. It's been almost half a year since I started to work at the University. And since then, I started to become more familiar with medicine, health issues. It is not only because we are originally a medicine school, a medicine university, but it's also because I owe a lot to my neighbors next to my office, who have been very busy in laboratories, with the mines, with something else, with all the creatures in grammar, you know. And tonight is a special moment for me, a special occasion for me, just to expand my experience and my knowledge in energy towards health and medicine issues. So I would also like to ask for your understanding. There will be some doctors, candidates around me, and if I make an error, please just talk to me right now so that I can know where I am going about it. Today I'm going to talk about energy security. It's been almost 20 years since I started to work on energy security. And since then, a lot changed, not only in terms of local issues, but also in terms of global parameters. Things that we have not talked nowadays are at the very heart of everything, including, for instance, carbon emissions. And I'm going to talk, or I'm going to address this distinguished group of people in order to bring important issues of energy security up to your information, up to your knowledge, and from three distinct perspectives. First of all, I will focus on energy security much more from economy or business perspective, and then I would like to move on from that narrow definition to a broader definition and include important challenges of our century, including, for instance, some environmental issues, some ecological issues, but by stemming from hardcore energy issues and in order to understand how energy transitions affect our daily lives and how our consumption patterns and daily habits interact with those energy security parameters. I would like to start my lecture by referring to a study of mine. I know it's not a very pleasure of doing this, but I have to because I was the one who introduced this concept at the very beginning. It was early 2010 when I started to work on conceptual energy security in order to transform it into a new phenomenon which I expected to facilitate understanding, teaching, and learning of energy security. So this is why I would like to start my presentation by referring to this article. And after that, I published almost 35 articles. You can all locate them in Google Scholar and download, or if you face some difficulty of downloading, you can directly ask me, email me so that I can share those articles, or if you're interested in one of them, either of them, I can share them with you. My main concern was, we had a very clear definition of energy security, and it is indeed a very clear way of asking energy security, regardless of your position in private sector, in public sector, in university, so far as we refer to four important parameters of energy security. And those are price, volume, time, and place. In other words, we assume energy security to be a function of these four parameters. And this is how we understand how much time you're going to need and how much money we're going to need just to secure a sufficient amount of energy at given time, at given place. I frequently refer to an example of a person or a family living on the top of a mountain in a cottage. And let's assume that we are living in a cottage on top of a mountain. How would we try to cope with winter conditions? The first thing, we would try to secure, along with food and water, of course, and they will be important in the broader concept of energy security, will be our annual need of energy resources. So we will try to secure sufficient amount of wood, coal, oil, gas, or whatever we can have in order to confront, in order to not confront tough winter conditions outside, but comfortably inside. But energy security has gone beyond this. Because whenever you talk to a professional in the energy sector, the main parameters, of course, would be these four. And whenever you talk to a professional at ministries, for instance, again, the main parameters will be these four. But along with these four parameters, we nowadays have important challenges that directly affect these four parameters: amount, time, value, and place, and being interacted by those four parameters too. There is a practical way of transforming these four parameters into a broader concept by referring to four A's: availability, accessibility, affordability, and acceptability. Availability embraces the volume parameter. Accessibility includes time and place. Affordability refers to the function of pricing, and acceptability is about the social or socio-economic aspect of energy security, which means that whatever we have as energy security should be accepted by the public too. The public may be concerned with health issues, may be concerned with water, may be concerned with air quality, it doesn't matter, may be protesting. Regardless of those issues, it has to be accepted by the public. But I assume that these four parameters, along with these four A principles, were not adequate to understand or to respond to current challenges. This is how I tried to develop a new concept or new principles, which I labeled as the 5 principles of energy security. And this time, I transformed these four parameters and other values into feasibility, accessibility, sustainability, and transparency. And what I understand from these four, it has to be feasible, whether we like it or not. It is about pricing, and it is about supplying our daily needs without endangering the future. So it has to be affordable. And it has to be sustainable too, because whatever we have in this century is about our debts to the next generation. So it has to be sustainable too. Another important one was accessible. So you may have sufficient or abundant resources, but if they're not available at the given time, then it has to do nothing with your daily needs or with your future needs. So it has to be accessible too. And all of these parameters refer to actual events, actual cases, actual incidents, some of which I will be sharing in the next slides after finishing this conceptual part. And the last one of these principles was transparency, feasibility, accessibility, sustainability, and transparency, which I believe is very important, as we will be addressing while discussing the cases about, for instance, the BP oil spill in Gulf of Mexico, or hydrofracking in the United States, or coal mines around the globe. So transparency is also an important function of energy security beyond the 4 parameters. And by the way, I would also like to talk about those pictures. You can see them on the slide because they tell us a lot about the evolution of energy. Now, it was once about coal, then it turned out to be oil, then nuclear, then gas, and then we went beyond this. But we should also keep in mind that we cannot undermine or underestimate our renewable resources. And yet, we should also acknowledge that renewable resources for the next at least 150 years will not be sufficient to supply 30-35% of our daily needs given the global consumption levels. We will be talking about them. But these pictures tell a lot when we conceive them from the energy transition perspective. And what is an energy transition? Energy transition is a sort of shift from one kind of production and consumption pattern to another. But in each phase or in each level, we assume that at least there is one particular or two kinds of energy resources with clear and deep impact on social, economic, industrial, military processes. This is how we can start, for instance, our analysis from early 19th century or late 18th century, where it was all about coal. And after the discovery of oil in Pennsylvania in 1856, and in parallel with that, the rise of oil industry in Baku, and in parallel with that, the first investments of British Petroleum, at the time it was Anglo-Persian company, in today's Iran, we see this shift very clearly. Just think or remember the consequences, the processes of industrial revolution. It was about coal at the very beginning. It was a coal society. And then what have we seen? We had seen that it turned out to be about oil when Winston Churchill decided to shift Britain's name from coal to oil. And it was not that easy. While addressing to the parliament, he was blamed about not foreseeing the future or not having a clear foresight that it would be leading to disastrous consequences once Britain decides to shift from coal to oil. But it was not the case though. And then we see the very first establishment of Anglo-Persian Oil Company until Mossadegh expulsed the company from today's Iran. And then we see the rise of another oil system in today's Russian Federation, or at the time it was the very evil Bolshevik revolution. And we also can talk about the rise of an industrial oil nation in today's United States. And then in the 1960s, we can talk about a very important report written by a geologist working at the Shell company. Today we know him, or we identify him with the Hubert theory, which claimed that it would be leading to disastrous consequences had not the United States switched from oil to nuclear energy. And this is how he convinced the United States to switch from, or to move on by building new nuclear power plants in the United States. And this is how we started to talk about the oil and nuclear age in the late 19th and early 20th century. What does this have to do with our lecture? When we analyze the historical energy transition from one particular energy type to another, we can distinguish distinct types of energy resources. Nuclear on one hand, renewables on the other hand, and hydrocarbons from the very beginning and to the very last. And what do we understand from hydrocarbons? They are the compounds of hydrogen and carbon atoms. And what does this have to do with our lecture today? Interesting as it seems, our historical evolution has lots of things to do with the replacement of increased number of hydrogen versus decreased number of carbon atoms. Now this tells us about methane, ethane, propane, butane, which we are nowadays using at our homes, in our cars, our airplanes. But when we refer to hydrocarbons from to wood, from coal, to oil, and to gas, we can identify this pattern. In each of these phases, the shift from wood to coal, from coal to oil, from oil to gas, can be identified by an increase of hydrogen atoms and a decrease of carbon atoms. And this is what we have been talking about since the very beginning of the 21st century. And that means if we take this pattern as a given, can we imagine a new energy transition to pure hydrogen? And this is one of the most intricate questions of nowadays, but I can assure you that it's not going to be very shortly. So we will need to wait at least 50, 60 years to see, to witness the use of pure hydrogen water, perhaps in our automotive industry, in aviation industry, or in homes, at home. But whether we accept this as a given or not, there is this pattern that each of these transitions took place with an increasing number of hydrogen atoms and a decreasing number of carbon atoms. This is very important to note, because despite this pattern, we see, or we can claim about global warming, we can claim about the particles we have been breathing for the past 4 or 5 years, not only in Beijing but also in Istanbul. We can talk about, for instance, the Istanbul type of asthmatic diseases. There is this labeled in the literature, I read an article. And why does this happen? Despite the increasing number of hydrogen atoms and the decreasing number of carbon atoms, because of our consumption. Because we have started to boost our consumption for the past 50 years. But it is not only coming from the OECD countries, it is also about the non-OECD countries, and it is also about the Chindi effect, as we label. That means Chinese and Indian consumption come together and boost our global consumption levels. And what does this tell us? We're facing important challenges because all the people in the world, let's not generalize, there are many people in the world who want to live or who want to adopt our way of living here in Istanbul, or in Europe, or in the United States, or in Australia, or I can just like this, at OECD averages. And there is this challenge. Have everyone living on this planet adopted a Western type of consumption at OECD averages, then we would need at least 5.5 planet Earth resources just to carry out our daily lives. So this is an important challenge. Prices. For most other people, energy security is about pricing. You can refer to, for instance, Daniel Jurgen's famous book, The Price, in order to understand how you can read history from oil price perspective. And indeed you can do that. Prices are important. Prices will be important. But it is not only about the amount of money we are paying or we will be paying to secure our energy needs. Prices are about the bills we're paying for health, for food, for water. Prices are about the air quality we want to breathe. And how does this happen? You can see patterns of increasing and decreasing pricing on this chart. But beyond that, we should also acknowledge that, ironic as it seems, we need high oil prices to secure renewable energy, for at least under given circumstances of renewable energy. That means we need oil prices about $45 to make 1,000 megawatt of wind energy driven investment feasible. It also applies for other resources such as geothermal under given conditions. And ironic as it seems, the higher the oil prices are, which means that the higher our consumption is. And the more we consume, then this turns into a vicious dilemma. And I assume that, I can expect your questions later or now. It doesn't, it's up to you. If you have questions about the issues thus far, I would like to answer them, or you may also prefer asking me at the very end of the presentation. So let's keep on it. Let's keep on. I assume that we have made enough discussion about the prices, the volume, the narrow definition of energy security, and the way how we can broaden this concept of energy security by including new parameters, new principles for environment, ecology, socioeconomic concepts. And how can we relate these issues with prices and with international law? This was one of the challenges that I faced while trying to tailor a presentation to this distinguished audience. If we need more oil, if you need more gas, if you need more energy resources, what do? We explore them. But what happens when we run out of the deposit in a given well, deposit in a given reservoir? We look for neighbors. And what happens? After the exhaustion of those newly found wells, or deposit, or reservoirs, then this time we go offshore. We explore hydrocarbons under the sea. We start to explore hydrocarbons on the Arctic. And then what happens? We defer to principles of international law to understand our rights, or to understand how we can create de facto situations in order to claim renewable rights in the future. And now we can talk about a growing competition in the Arctic, but also a growing competition in the oceans. A very hot case that I would like to share with you is this. Now, we look at this map from energy security perspective and combine our perspective with the principles of international law. But I would like to ask you, which principles of international law defines the parameters of energy security? We have to take into consideration at least three aspects. The first one is about contracts. So if you have a problem with your counterpart, you go to the court, you can ask, you can claim your rights and ask for compensation. This frequently takes place between Turkey and Iran, for instance, or Turkey and Russia, for instance, or Russia and Turkmenistan, for instance. Another way of referring to international law is about your production sharing agreements. And this happens in many regions of the world. Take BP working in Covita region of Russian Federation, for instance. We witness how BP referred to the court in order to ask some royalties. And the third way of the use of international law is about the sea law. It is important. And why is it important? Because we started to look for oil and gas or other sources, other resources under the sea. And what happens if it is a deep sea beyond our territorial waters? This time, we can talk about two kinds of resources. The first one, as you would, or at least some of you would know, is the Geneva Convention, 1958, so far as I remember, and the other one is 1982, UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. There is an important difference between these two, and it has lots of things to do with Turkey's positioning in Mediterranean. Turkey did not accept the shift from Geneva Convention to UNCLOS. And the reason for this was UNCLOS was favoring island countries by considering the fact that they need a sea country in order to secure their daily needs, such as fisheries, such as other resources. And this is how we see that a sort of priority was attributed to the continental country or continental state in Geneva Convention, unlike to the, or in contradiction with 1982, which gave right, much more right, to the island countries. And this map defines the current situation in Eastern Mediterranean from the perspective of 1982 UNCLOS. But is it only about the way how we share resources when it is about the sea? Is it only about the volume of oil or gas we expect to produce offshore? And is it only about the cost of production under the sea, the cost of transportation, or the money we intend to secure in terms of profits? No, it is not, because we have different aspects too. And this picture, is this picture familiar with you? BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Some of you may be familiar with the event, with the incident. I will be talking about it later. This is how we perceive the incident from the media as ordinary citizens. And this is how environmentalists, scientists conceive the incident. And this is what happened next. Can I have one, please? This is Tony Hayward speaking. He's apologizing from the world community about the incident in Gulf of Mexico. And then he was sent to the court along with BP. And BP was punished to pay billions of euros in order to balance the environmental consequences. I will be telling about this, no problem. but I will be happy if you can solve this problem because I have some other presentations. Okay. Okay.
So sorry.
Okay. Then you look at the revision material and I will try to interpret it for you. Okay. Then what happens? This is an important case to understand how energy security must be interpreted nowadays. But it also tells us a lot about the current business in the globe. Because Tony Hayward then resigned from his post and came to northern Iraq and became the CEO of General Energy, right? And then he transformed all his experiences from BP to the company over there. And he did a good job. Because, I mean, whether we accept or not, those companies, there's lots of know-hows and technology too. And it was a great opportunity for the companies working in northern Iraq just to benefit from that experience. So, on the one hand, we had a broader understanding of energy security, which tells us how risky it may be to carry out offshore exploration and production. And on the other hand, we have a current picture of global business in which a CEO has his value anywhere in the world. Okay, just you look at the vision. Then what can we do? Can we switch from hydrocarbons to nuclear energy? Yes, we may. And we did. And we have been doing so. But again, with important risks and threats. You're all familiar, I'm sure, with Chernobyl incident. And this video is about the consequences, the known and unknown consequences of Chernobyl, which tells us how energy intersects with public health. Because millions of people, not only Ukrainians, but also people in, for instance, Belarus, in northern regions of Russian Federation, along with the Karelian region, which goes in parallel with Finland, after the Arctic, started to suffer from diverse types of cancer, including leukemia, for instance. And also it was not only about the people suffering from health problems, but also it was about the ecological systems over there. It was also about children in the future, and it was also about at least 40 years wasted. And it is a big burden, a huge burden for any country in the world, and it was so for Ukrainians too. And I guess this is how we can combine issues of energy security with carbons, with climate change, with public health, but also our needs of food and water. Because whenever the prices hike, we also confront food problems. How does this happen? Because we start to cultivate more agricultural lands for the purpose of energy production. What do? We, for instance, allocate more lands for corn production, or for asparagus production, or for agricultural products which may help us or which may enable us to produce ethane or methane or derivatives from agricultural production. And what is the case about this? Take Brazil as an example. Brazil is a perfect case which shows how offshore production of oil and gas was boosted by the help of agricultural energy production. Because Brazil, along with the technical experience of Petrobras, the national oil company of Brazil, and with the foresight of the Brazilian government, decided to allocate waste lands for agricultural production destined to produce more ethane or ethanol or methanol products. And the idea was that Brazil thought we could support our labor activity, increase employment rates, because we are an agricultural country in many regions, and we can boost our agricultural production and then transform them into ethanol or methanol, and this is how we can supply our daily needs at home and export more oil and gas. This was the plan. It worked so. It worked in 2007, it worked in 2008, and then what happened next? There started a hype of agricultural products in wheat, for instance, in rice, for instance. And this resulted in growing malnutrition problems and starvation in Africa. So this is how we combine the energy nexus with food nexus. Hiking prices may result in growing food problems. Not that big or not that urgent for countries like Turkey, who can handle that problem, but an important burden for countries in Africa, for instance. This map tells us a lot, because when we look at the food situation or undernourishment, malnutrition, we can locate these countries on the map. But these countries are important because it's not only about the relationship between high oil prices and high food prices, or vice versa. Low oil prices would mean less lands allocated to agriculture and lower prices for food. But it is also about, as we will be seeing, the health aspect of carbon interaction with global warming. And how we combine all of this, that means if the average oil consumption daily exceeds 110 million barrels of oil, then we would expect to see a hike in oil prices, which will be leading to a hike in food prices and a hike in carbon emissions. Then what do we expect in terms of health? In terms of health, there will be at least two important aspects that deserve to be taken into consideration. The first one is, whether believe it or not, if you're not from medicine, the allergic reactions. Because there is this finding, which I cannot show you, but let me prove that I located and brought them with you. Okay? This tells us how carbon emissions result in more epidemics, not only in terms of allergic reactions and asthma, but also in terms of some diseases that we assume to be ended. And what are these? if the temperature rise keeps on its track, and if it is about 2 or 3 Celsius degrees, then we will be suffering at least 40% more from allergic reactions, because the time interval for the boost of pollens or pollen-based other allergic particles will be increased at least two times more than it used to be before it was 2 Celsius degrees warmer. So it's going to be an important problem too.
Can you ask a question?
Yes.
Some say that it's about violence trade. Actually, I mean, there are a lot of violence.
Mm-hmm.
But they narrowed in markets for violence items.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to ask about energy. Poor countries lack energy, or they don't have access mostly?
You mean poor countries? Which poor countries? In sub-Saharan Africa?
Yes.
Or in sub-Saharan Africa? Regardless of their resources, they lack access to daily needs. This is more important. They don't have infrastructures to carry out their daily needs. And this is more important whether they have enough oil or gas resources. Because regardless of their being able to commercialize those resources, they will be suffering those health problems so far as they lack infrastructures. In sub-Saharan Africa, they have resources, but they do not have, they lack, they're deprived of infrastructures. Yes, this is more important.
They say the same thing maybe with water, but they say in Africa actually there is water, but they don't have the infrastructure.
Sure, I mean, not everywhere in Africa, but there are some countries which have water. Such as, for instance, the Blue Nile Delta. Think about it. They have abundance of water. But they are deprived of infrastructures. Yes.
They cannot reach.
They cannot reach it. It's not available. And this is the transmission cycle of some diseases which stems from carbon-based emissions. And for those people from medicine, this is a very simplistic chart of understanding, and it tells us how some epidemic diseases have started to expand from human to human, from insect to human, and the most popular and current example of this is Zika virus. I'm sure that you must have read in the newspapers about this virus. So active. And now, I don't want to get in detail with the virus, but I would like to draw your attention on this map. Because we expect to see more problems of malaria, for instance, coming from those countries mapped with pink. And when you look at those countries, they were the ones you could see on this map too. But the problem is that it expands. And this is how in February, this month, the disease expanded to the United States because of transportation for sure. But we may witness a huge deviation of sub-Saharan Africa and the southern hemisphere from the northern hemisphere in terms of these two parameters: health problems, epidemic diseases, and food problems.
I have another question. You have that question, I can take the microphone. Any question?
But just 5 or 2 or 3 slides, then I can take all the questions, okay, if you allow me. And this map also tells us a lot because, it is not about coal, it is not about oil, it is not about nuclear, it is not about any kind of energy resource that we can blame. Because all of those energy resources have their own pros and cons. The problem is about their successful management. And this map tells us how successful the countries are in terms of their environmental architecture. That means we have energy resources, we have to use coal, oil, hydrocarbons, renewable energy, nuclear, and yet we have to cope with their negative impact. Because regardless of their being renewable or non-renewable, all of these energy resources have their own pros and cons. This is why I frequently refer this sentence whenever I'm faced with this question. Then which energy type is the best? I don't think that we can assign or such a supremacy to a particular type of energy type. Because hydrocarbons, they have their own pros and cons. Renewables, they have own pros and cons. So do nuclear energy resources, and so do the others. But there's only one thing that we should acknowledge. The best or the most affordable, sustainable energy resource is the one that we don't use. That means if you use less lighting, if you use less mobility, if you can do that, I'm sure that's going to be the best time. But in any case, we have to manage exploration, production, transportation, consumption, and post-consumption activities from a managerial perspective in order to cope with those negative consequences and externalities. And when we look at this map, we can identify those countries who are good at doing so and who are not very good at doing it. And again, unfortunately, we can see a growing gap, a huge gap between the southern hemisphere, excluding Turkey and other neighboring countries, and the northern hemisphere, which is likely to be an important problem if the current track keeps on going unchanged. And this is also an important finding of things out of the survey. The question was this: which issues do you think will be most problematic throughout the 21st century? And the sample, or the population, the sample representing the population were the professionals, the managers, the CEOs of energy companies, and here are the results. And when we look at that, fiscal crisis, it has lots of things to do with oil prices and exchange rate policies, which we cannot think regardless of oil prices. It is about climate change. There's no need to talk about climate change, the way how it intersects with carbon emissions, water security. I just skipped talking about it, but we have this phenomenon of shale oil and shale gas and lots of things to do with our water resources, hydrofracking, organized crime, terrorism, migration, and think what may happen if the current trends keeps on going. We will definitely be confronting more migration from southern hemisphere to northern hemisphere. So energy security is about price, volume, time and place. But it is not only about those four parameters. It is also about health. It is also about the quality of life. It is also about our future. What is next? We cannot expect to see a perfect transition to hydrogen society. But we can expect to see a shift to a sort of energy mix era in which all the countries, all the cities, whether be them smart or not, will be trying to balance the negative consequences and the negative externalities by a broader diversification of their suppliers and suppliers. And this may be channeling some new problems, and it will be more manageable, I guess. Thank you.
Sorry for the previous interruption. We want to hear, really, how do you feel about it? What do they do? What's the function? Do they have good attention, bad attention to just some innocent student?
Okay. Actors of energy security. We need to talk about many actors of energy security. OPEC is an important actor. International Energy Agency is an important actor of energy security. Governments are important agents and actors of energy security. So are non-governmental organizations, including Greenpeace or other environmental organizations. I never judged about their being sincere, goal-oriented, being manipulated, being supported. It is not important, and it is not a big deal for me. Whether Greenpeace or any other environmental organization being funded by an energy company or not, this is not important. But it is important that they function as factors of transparency. And this is very important. Because whether be them being manipulated, being funded, or just being independent actors trying to work for the common well-being, we can never judge the intentions, but we can judge the consequences. And the consequence is they function as the agents of transparency because they somehow expose problems. And this is what I guess is important. Just please.
During your research, preparing this presentation, have you ever encountered or got any information from the Zeitgeist movement?
No. Because this presentation is based on my previous research, original research articles. So this is why I started by addressing or by referring to my own articles. Of course, there are many resources that I referred, or many case analysis, some results of experiments over there, but you can all find them in my previous research papers, and you can locate them in Google Scholar.
Are you familiar with the Zeitgeist movement?
I am familiar with the Zeitgeist movement by the help of my students, because they know better than me, but they frequently refer to that and send me some review or something like that, but I'm not. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you very much for your
Okay.